Hi, Greg from Curry Country Living. Well, the weather has warmed up a little bit, only minus 15 today, which I'll take considering we've been getting anywhere from minus 20 to minus 35 for the last little while. We got another, I don't know, probably probably closer to 10 centimeters of snow last night, so gonna spend some time out here cleaning out the yard. But in this video, I'd like to talk to you about the outside wood boiler I bought in the fall. I've got 4 solid months under my belt. I picked up a Polar G2Plus. I chose it over top of a Heatmaster. I just felt overall it was a better made stove, and I have had some hiccups with it in regards to just going from a conventional type outside wood boiler to a gasification. So it doesn't matter what kind of gasification you have, I think they all operate on the same principle. But without taking any more of your time, have a look. It's a blended video. I've got some thoughts in there, what I was thinking last year and what I found out this year. Just on my way out to stoke the Polar in the morning. This is a Sunday. Usually during the week I stoke it between 6 and 7 in the morning. That's just my routine, getting up, doing the chores. We've had weather here. Last night was about 16, 17, minus 16 or 17 Celsius, which is 3 or 4 degrees Fahrenheit overnight. It's been nice mild weather, no wind. I usually get in up to minus 20 Celsius, which is about 0 Fahrenheit, I can get about 10 to 12 hours of burn on the Polar using oak. And I can usually get that fairly consistently without too much of a problem. So I've been using oak during the cold months, late December, January. This is the end of January right now, making this video. But usually when I come out, my routine is, well, if it's dark outside, I turn my light switch on. I go around to the side here, give her a couple of shakes. I actually cleaned the stove out here just the other day, and that was the first time that I opened up the side door to take the ashes out, and was quite impressed with how dry and no creosol, no other kind of garbage, just fly ash got into that. So with the Polar stove, when you open the door, it triggers a switch in the side which will ramp up the fan. The stove is running right now because it's calling for heat, and I probably not gonna have a whole pile of coals in there or not, but you can see that switch right there, and basically when you open up the door it just ramps up the fan. Or if the boiler wasn't on at all, there's no extra switch to bypass it. It would turn the fan on automatically if the stove hadn't been calling for heat. Always a good idea when you're opening up the door, whether it's a Polar or a Heatmaster or anything, that you open it up slowly. These stoves are extremely airtight, so if there's going to be a whoosh, it's going to happen when you open up that door. So I'm pretty good. But yeah, this is probably an example of I've let the stove go too late. I don't have a pile of coals down there right now, and this is just something you learn after a while. When to stoke your stove using different types of wood. So I kind of suspected this. I'm about an hour and a half behind on normally stoking the stove. It's Sunday morning, so I slept in a little bit today. Anyways, the first thing I do after opening up the door is I usually poke the ashes from the side, from the holes. And the biggest thing is not to get any of those what I call clinkers, and they're kind of like hard, I don't know how you describe them. I guess it's moisture that gets into the ash, and I compare them to the old coal clinkers that we used to get in the coal stove growing up at home. But I'm actually using the wrong poker here. Where is my right one? Here it is there. This one works better, the one with the end on it, because then you can can get down the sides. So yeah, so that's that procedure. Just fluff it all up, and I will throw the wood right on top of that. It'll catch fire. It'll take a little bit to get going, but my house won't cool off. I use rads, so there's enough hot water in the boiler that will maintain the temperature of the house until this starts going. So I will fill that up, but after I've filled that up, I usually check the bottom door here. And you can see that the ash falls through the nozzle down there. And I can usually get 2 or 3 days before I clean that. So it'll probably make it till tonight or tomorrow, and I'll clean that out. And again, it depends on how much wood you're burning or what type of wood, how often you'll fill that out. But yeah, some video footage of filling the stove. I usually stove it. My routine right now up to -20 during a work week is I stoke it between 6 and 7, and then I check it at noon when I come home, and at night I stoke it around 5 o'clock, so let's call that 10 hours, and there's usually lots and lots of coals, and I'll stoke it. And then just to get me through the night, if it's cold or if it's windy and I really don't want it cooled off at night, I'll stoke it again at about, I don't know, in between 8 and 10. And sometimes I do that and sometimes I don't, just depending on the weather. But up to -20, I am getting that 10 to 12 hour burns, which is quite workable for me. Smarter. So I've been doing a lot of research on wood stoves, and what I found is there's a pile of them out there and it can get confusing really fast. So far I have found that gasification is probably the way I want to go. It's the most efficient wood stoves over multi-pass. My stove from 1990 is basically 2 metal drums welded together with hot water, and you can throw whatever you want into it and it throws heat. It takes a pile of wood. Last year, warm winter, I probably used between 22 and 25 cord of wood. With a gasification unit, same type of winter, I'm told that it could reduce the wood load down to 12 to 15 cord, which is pretty substantial. So I'm pretty excited about that.
The whole idea is there's a triangle. There's oxygen, fire, and heat. Like, you got to be able to have all three to create an efficient burn.
Yeah.
So when it all comes down to it, if you don't have enough heat in your firebox, you're going to be sending smoke up the stack. And if you don't have a good heat exchanger, you will not be collecting the heat that's also going through the stack. So it's a very fine line that you got to follow. So now, to answer your initial question, the downdraft has pretty well solved all of those issues. They're the only ones that I've known to be compliant right now to meet the suitable standards for self-sufficient and carbon neutral. by allowing the gases to go downward, the gases has to go through the coal bed, so they're being heated up to over 2,000 Fahrenheit.
Yeah.
The molecular structure does get cracked, and so then now putting into a large refractory brick, where that refractory brick is able to now exceed higher temperatures than you'd even want metal to. Like this, we're talking about forging temperature now. So now you have to get the right ratio of air and the right ratio of smoke. Well, it's not essentially smoke once it gets burned. So now it needs to be properly mixed, and so that's where the downdraft comes into play.
I've been looking at Heatmaster, I've been looking at Polar. I know gasification is kind of the way I'm leaning, and I've been doing a lot of research on them. But today is the last day I'm going to stoke my Aquatherm. So it's kind of a end of an era, I guess you could, so to speak. So here's me, one final time, stoking what I call the beast for 2021.
Okay.
So I don't normally have to use a Tiger torch to keep the stove going, but because I'm only burning or stoking once every day and a half, 2 days, I can let it go out. It doesn't warm or cool the house off very much. But today I'm going to use a Tiger torch, and this is how I normally start my wood stove. All outside wood boilers basically work on the same principle. They're heating water, which is then transferred via pipes to either a building, such as a house or a shop or greenhouse, whatever you like to be heated. In my case, my house is an older house, built in 1911. I have all the original rads in the house still. So all I do with this wood stove, basically without a heat exchanger, and I know you can't do that, or it's not suggested doing that with the new ones, but without a heat exchanger, I directly pump water from this wood boiler into my house through the rads. Works excellent. Inside my barn, I have in-floor heat on a separate loop with a heat exchanger in between. And that just keeps contaminants from getting into any of the floor pipes. It also helps reduce, apparently for the newer wood stoves, you don't get such a shock and difference in water coming back, which apparently is fairly important. I never worried about it with this one, with the Beast, because it always worked. And then I have forced air into the attic. But cutting wood this year with the idea that I am going to have a new wood boiler in place for this one sometime before fall. And so I've been cutting my wood 20 inches or less, 18 to 20 inches, and I've been splitting so it dries. The new gasification units, I don't have any experience with them, but apparently they need drier heat. I'm not going to get away with just throwing junk in there, which I'll probably miss, but I won't miss having to cut an extra 12 to 15 cord to heat the same square footage. So now I'd like to talk to you about what I have discovered after 4 months of burning with the gasification stove. And I obviously ended up picking up a G2Plus Polar after looking at Heatmaster, which was the only other option available. And so this would, I would assume, apply to both units, when you're coming from conventional. So you've seen some of the footage where I had the Beast. I had that Beast for 30 years, and that thing was very, very forgiving. So the first thing I noticed with a gasification stove is they're not quite as forgiving. So when I first started off the Polar, and I started off burning, I believe it was October, November, it was probably in that October area, is that they really do need to have dry wood. You can't be throwing garbage wood or wet wood into them. And I'm going to refer to my notes here back and forth because there's a lot of stuff that I wanted to go over here. So I plugged the nozzle twice on that stove, and when you plug a nozzle on a gasification unit, they don't function. So you need to be very aware of the kind of wood that you're putting into them, and making sure that that nozzle didn't plug. I think I plugged the nozzle just because the second time was definitely my fault, because I knew it could possibly happen. I get what I call clinkers in there, and I'm not sure just why I'm getting it, but I kind of think it's the moisture on the snow or the moisture of the wood, and it kind of dries up and does a kind of a clump. And if you rake the coals the wrong way, it puts them into that nozzle. The other thing I discovered quite quickly is my stove was undersized. The G2Plus is rated around that 100,000 BTU mark. You know, at the time talking to Travis and whatnot, we thought that would be the right size stove for the amount of square footage, but after going through it into some cold months, it became quickly obvious that it wasn't big enough. So when I talk about the same square footage, I'm actually just heating the house, and I have the barn on electric. The Polar would heat both, but I'd be stoking every 6 hours, every 5 hours. So Travis has been great. The dealer that I bought the stove off of, they've offered to put me into a bigger stove at a very reasonable rate. The G2 I'm sorry, the G3, which is about 30% bigger. And between that and the stuff I've learned, I feel that would be a nice fit. So that's kind of what we're talking about right now here in February. The size of the wood going in. So if you think of, I think I talked about cutting the wood at 20 inches in length, but I have a crew that comes in. I have all my son-in-laws come in, and we have a big wood bee. So my wood lengths kind of get all over the place, and by all over the place I mean anywhere from 16 to 24 inches. And I really need to tighten that up to maximize the capacity of the wood box. So my pieces are anywhere from 16 to 24 inch, and when I throw them in there, if you get a bunch of 16-inch wood pieces in there, the wood box itself could hold 29. My wood splitter is 24, so 22 would be a nice fit. You're talking, if you get a bunch of 16s in there, you know, probably 25% not taking advantage of the capacity of the wood box, which will affect the amount of hours you get in the burn. I'm after a 12-hour burn. That would be my happy space if I could throw wood in there on average with normal weather in southern Manitoba here being, you know, minus 20 degrees Celsius and warmer most days, with some small breaks of minus 30 and nasty. So the wood length is important, and that's one thing that I discovered fairly quickly as well. But, I picked up an Inkbird, and it basically is a Wi-Fi temperature monitor, and that thing really helped me immensely to keep track of my stove from wherever I was. I actually can tell. I've got comfortable enough with the stove now. I can tell whether, by that Inkbird, by what the temperature is doing, what the temperature is doing outside, whether or not I've got a plugged nozzle, which has only happened a couple of times, or whether or not the stove's getting low. You can tell by the graphs on it. And so that's something that's really helped me out with this stove and keeping it monitored. I guess the other thing I can speak to this winter, and it was interesting because I got an email from Manitoba Hydro, and basically it was a PR letter, because I guess they'd had so many people phoning in and getting a hold of them asking, why is my heating bill gone up? And basically our winter has been 25% colder this winter, which I can believe, and storms and wind. So when I try and compare wood usage of the conventional to the gasification, it's really hard. I'm not comparing apples to apples here, because like I say, I pulled the barn off just because the stove couldn't keep up, and plus we got a lot colder winter. So in a normal cold winter, and this one is more than cold, even by southern Manitoba Canadian standards, I would use probably in that 20 to 24 cord mark. And when I speak cords, I'm talking 128 square feet per cord. I'm on track right now, just heating the house with my hot water heater with the Polar G2Plus. I'm on track, probably gonna hit that 12 to 15 mark. I've still got another 6 weeks of winter, and the forecast is a lot warmer for the next couple of weeks, and that makes a big difference. An older house, not terribly well insulated, hot water tank. You know, there's probably a lot of improvements I can make to the house as well to save on some of those heating losses. So as far as the efficiency of the stove, I'm really happy with that. I'm really getting to enjoy this stove. And when I say enjoy, when it first started out, I found it frustrating. If you're going from a conventional to a gasification and thinking it's just going to be an easy switch over, well, I kind of thought with 30 years of burning wood behind me, it was going to be a no problem. But there's some learning curves and little tips, lots of little stuff that you wouldn't normally think of with the old conventional. Like I say, that was a very forgiving stove. This one, for lack of a better word, you have to kind of build a relationship with and kind of know what it likes and what it doesn't like, and when it needs to be tended to, and what you can get away with, and paying attention to the weather. So at the beginning of this video, I talked about my routine with the Polar, and it's a fairly straightforward routine. Basically, for 3 days of the week, I spend literally 10 minutes a day loading it twice and checking the temperature and making sure everything's all right. And then the other 3 or 4 days of the week, I'll spend just cleaning out that bottom ash in cold weather and whatnot. So, you know, like if you're looking at, I don't know, on average, probably 10 to 15 minutes a day is what you're spending with that stove, stoking it twice a day. The cleaning out itself, I'll maybe give you some. I took a bunch of video footage of cleaning out the ashes and stuff, and I'll just put to some music. I don't think I talked to it, but maybe I can do a voiceover. Very simple to clean, very simple to get at everything, and I've heard that's one of the big pluses of the Polar. I've heard that some of the other ones are a little bit harder to clean, but with the Polar, I don't know how you'd get any simpler. Drawbacks to the Polar, well, undersizing isn't a drawback. That was a mistake on my part. I have heard chatter on the Facebook pages and stuff about the doors, and actually Travis has said this too, like the doors could, and I think they're working on that, better insulating the doors. The fan in the back, there's just one main fan. You know, I talked to Travis the other day. It's about $300, and I think he told me between $350, $400 for that fan back there, which sounds like a lot, but I took a fan out of that beast, just one of those straightforward little fans, and that cost me almost $200. So, but that fan on the beast lasted for 25 years, I think, before I had to change it. So there is definitely more maintenance on a gasification unit compared to the conventional. I don't think that's going to be a huge issue, especially with the trade-off with the wood. So my conclusions going forward, I've had 4 months under my belt. Number one, when I start cutting my wood, I'm going to make sure it's at 22 inches in length. I'm going to try and get a year ahead. I brought some wood in actually just last week, 12 cord of poplar, and of course I've got 100 acres here of my own that I can cut with oak. So I need to get a year ahead, and that's not something I ever had to do with conventional, because that beast would burn anything. But I think that's all I can talk about right now. If you have any questions, no matter what, just throw them in the comment sections below. Love talking about this kind of stuff. I'm not an expert by any means, but I'm learning a lot as I go. So yeah, as always, stay safe out there. If you like this video, consider giving me a thumbs up, subscribe to my channel, leave some comments, and until next time, stay safe, stay warm, and we'll catch up to you later.